Welcome back to Success Through Connections with Zelda. And today I have a really cool uh, guest with me. I have Nancy Micheili, and she is the guru of networking. She's going to give us all kinds of tips on how you can make great connections through networking, because I know, when you go to networking events, sometimes it's a little scary and there's a lot of introverts in the room, and so you want to take them all in. So I want Nancy to share with us a little bit today about, well, how she got into this area of expertise. What was your aha moment when you said, this is for me? Tell me a little bit about your networking.
So, networking was not something that came naturally or easy to me. I am very introverted, even though I can come across as extroverted. And the idea of going to networking events in my corporate career was just something I never really thought of. And it wasn't until I stepped into entrepreneurship that I knew I needed to build new connections with the new audience that I wanted. And my first real aha with networking came, I was at a Chamber of Commerce event, and it was actually on a boat. So it was convenient. We were all stuck in a place together. But I had seen somebody new to our town get posted in a job, and he happened to be on the cruise ship. He did not know anybody who was there. And we had this background in wine. And so he used to be a grape grower, had started a vineyard many years ago, was now in our city doing business development, especially for entrepreneurs, all the way to big corporations. And so I just went up, and when he showed up, said, "Hey, my name is Nancy." And I had connected with him on LinkedIn. So I had recognized him and broke the ice. And instead of talking about what I do, I actually connected with him about wine. And we both had a glass of wine in our hands. And I'm like, "What is it that you're drinking?" And so it just led to this great conversation about a totally different topic than what we were on. But what was great was he became the catalyst in my future networking. So from that, he asked me what I did, and I told him that I help companies and corporations with communication and leadership. And the next thing I know, he's like, "Would you be able to do a leadership event for our board of directors?" And so I said yes to that, went in and did that. From that, members of that board then invited me to do more activities with theirs. And it just kind of spun from there. But it was that first time I realized that how important networking was, and it didn't need to come across as this sales pitch that
Right.
I had in my head.
So that's interesting, because I know that you said that when you went to this networking event, this gentleman was there. Now, did you know in advance he would be there?
No, I didn't.
So I like to think about a networking as strategic. So
Mhm.
how do you strategically? I know what I do to strategically go. I like to get a list of who's going to be there, but you can't always do that. So are there some strategies for networking when maybe you don't know who's going to be there, or just some strategies for networking smartly, not to say,
For networking smartly. So one of the things that I love is with the Chamber of Commerce, it's a great place locally to start to network. And so just even potentially posting something through their site. So if they have a LinkedIn or a Facebook page, just post, even if you don't even need to put your picture up, just post, say, "Hey, is anybody going to be at the event?" And so you can start to reach out, because when we do these common places that we're going to network, we're part of typically some event, some group that we're following. And just posting, especially now with the emojis that you can do that look like yourself, just post a note and say, "Hey, I'm going to this event. Who else is coming?" and allow them to respond.
That's a great tip. Now, let's suppose you're at the event. Now, this is one where I know a lot of
Mhm.
people struggle. So you get to this event and you walk in, you look around the room, and you're like, don't know anybody. What are some great little tips for some small talk or how to get into a conversation? You might see it's kind of like a loaded question. You might see a group of people. How do you interject yourself into that group? Or just some small talk. How do you like? I love how you said we didn't start with what do you do? We started with, hey, what are you drinking? And because you knew that he was a wine connoisseur. So can you give us some
Yeah.
tips on that?
So for me, I start with questions. So I try, because I can be very nervous in these type of events, I try and take the pressure off of me and open space up for others to talk. So usually what I do, instead of interjecting into a big group of people that are standing there, I find one other person who is standing in the room by themselves,
Oh, the
looking
wildflower.
exactly, a wallflower looking lost like me. And I go up to that person and I will ask a question. And I always start my questions with what instead of why, because why puts us on a bit of defense, but what? So, what inspired you to come to today? What is something that's just gone really well in this past week or this past like couple days? And just allow them to kind of relax and allow yourself to relax. And then once you've got one person, you now can be a team to go find another couple people to go introduce
So I have a
yourself
question
to.
about that. So you've this is something that I personally struggle with. So you get together and you're one on one with somebody and everything is lovely, but there are other people and sometimes you get kind of stuck. How do you get unstuck with that
Hmm.
one person without being rude or being super obvious like I need to move on? How do you discreet or
How,
not discreet, how do you tactfully move on?
how do you tactfully move on? Well, networking events are really about you moving on to other people. And so I always say at the end, thank you very much for your time. My goal is actually to connect with as many people as possible. So I'm going to shift and move on, but I look forward to connecting with you in the future. And so I leave them feeling great and let them know that it's part of my strategy.
So you let them okay, do you exchange business cards?
Depends on whether it makes sense. Sometimes I will exchange business cards in the reference that maybe we are not a good fit for each other, but maybe I can find somebody who will be a good fit for you. And so often we think of networking as ourselves and that sales perspective. But networking, as you say, is success through connections, is often about taking those few minutes and saying, hey, what do you do? How can I help you find the right person in this room? Or maybe in my bigger circle. So I will take their card and often give it to someone else.
And I'll often, when I'm at an event and I know a lot of the people, it might be one of the groups that I regularly frequent, and I'm meeting somebody new and they tell me what it is they do. I'll ask them, you know, what kind of clients are you looking for, whatever. And I'll go, oh, I have somebody I want to introduce you to. So I'll take them over and introduce them to that person. And then I can very tactfully
Right.
move on.
Exactly. Exactly. And that is a great way, especially when you, as I said at the start, like find somebody and be like, okay, let's go together to see if we can find someone else to connect with, or I can do an introduction if I know people. But sometimes
Exactly.
I'm at events and I don't know a soul in the room. But by listening and getting their cards and understanding what it is they need, as I meet other people, I can then create those synergies for people.
You know, one of the things I see a lot, and it leads to the question I was going to ask you about frequent mistakes people make. And I'm
Mm.
thinking the biggest mistake is maybe they see buddies that they know and they go and they spend their time with them. And I'm like, well, you should just
Yes.
go to lunch with them because you're defeating the purpose of the networking. So, what are some
Very
other common mistakes that people make when they are networking?
So I think one of the common mistakes that people make is they come off really strong and salesy, like they have to make a sale in that event. And
Wow.
sometimes it's not necessarily about coming and making the sale,
Mhm.
but finding people to connect with who start to know, love, and like you. And when they do, they will then recommend you as opposed to like going in with this idea that this is a sales mission.
Yeah, you can't go in there to sell. That's a super turn off. So how does the digital world affect networking? There's so many Zoom meetings and Google Meets and all this. How does the digital world affect the networking?
So digital world actually makes networking smaller. And I think one of the great things that came out of COVID was our ability to learn how to start to connect on these environments. And so, for example, you and I met through this digital networking
Yes.
process. And it was really the person who introduced us, who brought us together in the same network, commented on what it is that you do. And so then I just reached out and sent you a message privately in the messenger saying, "Hey, I'd love to know more about what you do. Can we connect?" And that led us to a conversation. Sometimes on it, it's just being the person who provides helpful tips so
Yeah.
that people afterwards are like, I want to reach out to that person to help them, to support them, to find out more. And so I think the digital world from that perspective comes across well. If I go back to your previous questions, though, about the mistakes people do in
Yeah.
the digital world, is they will pop their telephone number into the chat and really try and get people to like they will do a lot of self promotion in the background. And you need to be really aware of the host and what the expectations are of the group before you start to do those types of things.
That's interesting because I know in speaking, we both go to her name is Carrie Cohill. I'll give her credit. She's awesome.
Yes.
So for the listeners out there, and I did do a podcast on her about a week ago. She has what's called the Daily Success Call, and it's incredible. And that is how we met by this 8 a.m. phone call. And I know that at one point I had posted something in the private, in the chat rather, for the whole group. And somebody said, well, how do we reach you or something? Or we have some answers for you. I don't even remember what it was. It was so long ago. And I posted my phone number. They said, hey, if you can help me, here's my phone number. And then I was like, well, nobody's responding. So that's when I realized that's not the way to do it. You don't put your phone number in there. I needed
Yeah.
to reach out to maybe individuals.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's
Yeah.
what you put in that chat. But I never, that's interesting, Nancy, because my thinking was really digital networking. I never thought, well, wait a minute, that's how we connected.
Exactly.
Ding, ding, ding.
Exactly. Exactly. And there's lots of digital networking. Just even being on LinkedIn is like a phenomenal place for digital networking, especially from business perspectives. And
Yes.
just one of the best ways to digital network is just to positively comment on people's posts, their texts, just add useful information, support that concept. And if people put questions below, just offer to give some feedback or suggestions without selling. But to create that conversation starts by you responding. And one of the biggest misses I see in the digital world is that people will like a post, but they won't comment on a
Yeah,
post.
that's the
They
big
won't elevate it with their knowledge and skill set. And so your biggest opportunity is to actually do that in the digital world.
That's great. In fact, LinkedIn, someone reached out to me recently who I don't know. I don't just click yes, I'll accept your friendship or whatever, because when you go to LinkedIn, to me, that's people want to know, oh, I see, Nancy,
Yes.
can you make an introduction? Well, I don't really know Nancy. She just wanted to connect with me on LinkedIn. So I
Right.
don't just randomly accept everybody who says, hey, I'd like to connect with you on LinkedIn. But I did accept one recently to a fellow because I thought there might be some good synergy there. And then the next thing I know, he's reaching out to me to be on some other guy's television promotion show. So I was
Right.
like, okay, that was kind of interesting. So I'm going to be on his program. You never know where that's going to go. That's networking digitally.
Exactly.
And I never thought
That's
of it
it.
that way. That's a real,
Mhm.
I never
Yeah,
thought about it. I was like, how do you digital network? But duh.
that that is networking. And the reality is when you digital network, one of the biggest mistakes I see is people come at you with their sales package. Go to that person with something that you can do to offer to help elevate them without like selling them into your program. Just to provide them support. Just be like, I want to support you. How can I support you? And one of the best ways to support entrepreneurs, especially, is just by elevating their content, just by taking it and being like, I'm really impressed by you. This is really good stuff. Commenting on it so that they get that positive feedback and you can create that connection.
So when you, I know you that you're a coach. You right,
Yes.
you coach people in
Yeah.
networking. So now that what do you tell people to do now they've made a connection, a random connection at some event? What do you tell them is their first thing to do for a follow-up?
So the first thing that I do is invite them to coffee or invite them over for a drink. You may go out for a beer, but just go sit and invite them out and say, how can I support you in whatever it is that you do? And just take time in that moment to have a conversation, to get to know the person and not necessarily sell, but then at the end of it, say, is there an opportunity for us to go forward? Or would you like some help with whatever it is that they may be struggling with? And it's either something that you can do for them or it's something that you can refer them to somebody else. But
Yeah.
I invite people to sit down and have a coffee. And if you're in Florida, I'm in Canada, right? Like we're thousands of miles away, just even do a virtual coffee. It does not have to be in person at the coffee shop down the street. But for me, as a trained sommelier, I love to sit down with a drink and coffee, tea, alcohol, whatever it is that you work with. Just sit down and relax and just have a conversation.
That is great advice. So tell me a little bit about your coaching and what you do.
So
You can be
I
salesy
actually
here.
So, for the purpose of this, I actually have a program that I teach people strategies to network and I coach them through the techniques and support them with how to open those conversations, how to prepare themselves for the event that they're going to from just how you look and set you up for confidence. And it's called Networking with Confidence. And it's really great for those of us who don't like to be salesy, who have this fear of walking into a room and not being liked, and who are introverted and shy. So if you fit in any of those, this is the program for you. And what I start you with is just my freebie, which is the 5 conversation starters. And so to access that, you just want to look at my join NWC, Networking with Confidence, now.com/conversations. And I believe you're going to put that in the show notes. And it will get you into my email system where I'll be providing you with tips. And if you want to go forward with the program, I can show you that too. Or just follow me with tips and ideas.
And we will absolutely put that in the show notes. So can you give us one final tip for networking?
One final tip for networking. When you do your elevator pitch, create it as a story that people can envision instead of this is what I do. So, for example, I help people with networking, is what I could say. Or I could say, you know how we can be nervous walking into a room of strangers that we don't know? Imagine what it would feel like if you had the confidence to be able to go up to someone and say hello and ask a question without being salesy.
That's beautifully said. Wow. That's great advice. And I do get out there and network a lot. So I'm going to take you up on some of that advice.
Awesome.
Nancy, it's been, so again, tell everybody how they can reach you.
Yes. So you can reach me at nancymicheilicoaching.com is my main way to find me, and Nancy Micheili Coaching everywhere in all the different platforms is the easiest way to get a hold of me.
That is great. So that is going to conclude us for today. Nancy Micheili, she is the guru when it comes to networking. So give her a shout if you would like some help with that. And in signing off, I thank you for joining us again today on Success with Connections. And you just keep connecting. Till next
Thanks,
time.
Isabel.
Bye, everybody.